Okay, it's 11 o'clock Central. It's time to talk laundromats. Thank you so much for coming on board for Coin Laundry Association's monthly webinar for getting into the laundromat business. We're going to have a great hour together. You can see I've got a special guest that I'll introduce here in just a moment, but let me give you a couple of house cleaning things here first. Housekeeping. So we're using the Zoom platform. Before you ask, we are going to record this and make sure that everybody has a copy of this. So you're certainly welcome to take notes. And as I talk about in a moment, we'll have questions and answers, but just know that you're going to get a copy of the recording that you can review or share with other members of your team as we go along. This is much more interesting if you ask a lot of questions. And so there in the toolbar, you'll see that there's a question and answer area, and that's where you can type in your questions. You could do it in the chat too. It's a little bit easier if you put it in the question and answer, but I'll have both open on screen, and we'll make sure that in addition to the prepared material I have for you, we're going to be able to get through as many questions as we possibly can before the end of the hour. And we're going to also share toward the end, a few more resources that you can use to follow up. And as a result of this conversation, if you decide, hey, this isn't for you, great. We educated you, you move on to another opportunity. But if it's something you want to pursue further, then we have a number of other things that we can do to help you along the way through the association. So you also see Andrew in the webinar chat. He's a member of our team, and so he's going to be a little bit of my right hand in the chat box, answering questions and doing some backfill for me along the way. So let's jump in. Let's jump into the conversation. So let's begin with CLA. CLA is the not-for-profit trade association representing the laundromat industry. We've been doing so for more than 6 decades now. We are the preeminent resource for laundry professionals. And so like most trade associations, we do education, we do networking opportunities, events, advocacy, and we have a number of business solutions that are geared toward helping you be more successful with your store. But part of that educational mission, I think, is to try to work with those of you that are contemplating getting into the business and steer you in the right direction. What you're not going to hear this morning is a sales pitch or get rich overnight, or this is easy, or this is passive, or 13 days to your first laundromat, or 30 days, and those kinds of conversations. We're going to do our level best to tell you like it is, based on our extensive experience and our knowledge base of thousands and thousands and thousands of laundromat owners collectively over the years. And so I'm going to give you some reasons why you should think about the industry, why we love the business, and some things that will attract you. And then I'm going to balance that with some of the pitfalls, challenges, obstacles that may come your way. And then I'm going to walk you through some of the basic tenets of the business to help you better understand it. And like I said, take your questions along the way. So why am I here? I serve as president and CEO of Coin Laundry Association. I'm now 32 years into the business. And so my best qualification is again, thousands and thousands and thousands of conversations that I've had. So with laundromat owners that are out there doing it. So I'm sort of an academic in the sense that I've been able to kind of listen and synthesize and try to share back with you sort of the best practices and the experiences that our members have had. So I'm delighted to bring my 30 plus years to the table. And my special guest here is Brian Holland. You get 2 Brians for the price of 1 today. Brian is our board chair at Coin Laundry Association, and just so happens he was here for meetings. I said, we might as well put him to work. And the reason I wanted to include him in the conversation is that Brian has built the Laundry Cafe along with some partners in Philadelphia, growing to 5 large format premium laundromats. And he's been doing that for more than a dozen years now. And he's been there, done that. He's been in your position, and now he's volunteering his time and talent with the association. So we now have 2 people that can answer questions. And if we disagree, we might have to get into it here. A little bit of back and forth, but just delighted to bring more to the table. So last couple reminders: we are recording. You're going to get a copy of the recording for those of you that just logged on. Please use the question and answer interface as well as the webinar chat, and we're going to get through as many of your questions as possible. As I start moving through the prepared material, don't hesitate, put your questions in. I'll keep an eye on it. We'll stop, we'll answer questions, and we'll naturally, I think, get through all the content before the end of the hour. So again, thanks for being with us, and let's get rolling. So what is this business? Coin laundry, coin op laundry, lavanderette, lavanderia, washateria, laundrette. We're talking about laundromats. We're talking about a retail space that has vended laundry equipment for use by the public. What we're not is the vended laundry equipment that you would find in an apartment building or some kind of multi-housing facility. But that's how we're defining our industry, and that is somewhere on the order of 29,000 stores across the US, generating about $6 billion in annual sales. So maybe a little bigger industry than you may have understood at the outset. The statistical mean for the size of stores out there is about 2,500 square feet. But you can imagine we've got members that are very successful at 1,000 square feet. We've got members that are putting in stores that are 9 or 10 or 12,000 square feet. But I just wanted to give you the statistical mean. Certainly new stores going in today would certainly average more like 3,000 or 4,000 square feet.
I agree.
You know, and even more, that would be 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. I think your stores were mostly in the 5,000 to 7,000.
Everything we have is 7,000 square foot and above. One, it's 9,200 square.
Okay, so 7,000 to 9,200. So that's just the way Brian's approaching his market in Philadelphia, in case I had mentioned that earlier. So most of these locations are on a leased basis, right? So our members are, hey, I'm going to put in a laundromat. I'm going to negotiate a lease with a landlord. I'm going to be leasing my space for a certain period of time. I'm going to be talking about leases a lot as we go through the conversation. So that's the majority. But many, and I'm sure Brian would agree, the goal is to own the real estate whenever possible. It's not always available or financially feasible. But if we had 100 Brians in the room, they would all agree that ideally you could control the real estate. And again, we'll talk about that some more as we go along. So what's our core business? We're here to wash laundry. And the more people, the more dirty clothes. But there are some specific demographics that we focus on, primarily low to middle income renters. And increasingly, we're finding homeowners that are using us for convenience or using us for wash, dry, fold. But our core business would be those low income renters in the more densely populated areas. And it's about 20 million families every week that are coming to the laundromat. So we've got a lot of business to do, and we welcome your participation in that as we go forward. So that's sort of the overview, the tail of the tape. And I'm going to again encourage you to drop some questions. Who's going to be the first one to drop in a question? They get a gold star as we go along. But with that, I'll keep an eye on that. We'll go into some of the reasons why you are attracted to the business, or you should be attracted to the business, or things that our members love about the business. I think a lot of these fall under this notion of a necessity, a basic public health service, as came out of the pandemic, an essential business. Right. So people have to wash clothes, rain or shine, good times and in bad. And it's just one of those things that's always there. And so that steady, recurring, predictable, some would say boring, some would say routine. But when it's cash flow positive, those are some of the things that that you're wanting to to keep in mind. So it's that proven recession resistant, pandemic resistant, things that people need all the time. We find that it's what our members love about the business, and has brought so many of you to the table here in the last couple of years, especially coming out of the pandemic, looking for things that are going to provide that stability. And it's that weekly repetitive bought on convenience. You see the same customers every Thursday afternoon as you see on Monday morning.
Absolutely.
And so this is what we're there to do. So I'm going to kind of work through a couple of these, and I'll thank Shakai Abdallah, and we've got Lakeisha with a question, Jacqueline with a question. So we'll hit you up here in just a second. people say this is a passive or absentee or easy business. What do you say to that? Not. In a word, not. Yeah, I tend to, I reject the notion that this is passive or absentee, and it's not easy, but I will make the argument that it's simple, meaning simple is not easy. The keys to success: great location, customer service, meticulously clean store, friendly service, machine uptime. I mean, that's pretty much, machines need to work, it needs to be clean, friendly service, good location, ample parking. And, would you say that's kind of the key to success?
I think they absolutely are. Absolutely. I will tell you that people think that it's simple, but the truth is you need to engage customers, and you can't engage customers if you're not there, right? And you have to have a product that makes people want to come back, and people have access to you. Unlike many businesses where, the owners are behind a wall or they're not there, you see these customers every day, week after week, and you come to know people by name. You know their family members and their grandma and their kids' names, and they use the same machines more habitually.
They have their
than
favorite
not.
washer,
Yeah,
right?
favorite washer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's instructive about that is you're talking about that coming from someone who's operated 5 stores, 7,000 to 9,200 square feet, and you still feel like you have that personal connection with customers.
I can tell you, there's not a day that I walk in the store that somewhere between 6 and 10 people don't, not only speak, but want to come over and talk, and a couple of hugs. And I think it has to do with how you treat people too.
Yeah,
right?
taking care of the neighborhood. So say that the business allows for a lot of flexibility, right? So that's not the same as passive or absentee, but flexibility is one thing that I hear an awful lot from our members. So I've got a day job, or I've got another business, or I have other pursuits, or I want to drive the kids to school or coach Little League. They're just like any other business, you need to put the time in, but you have something to say about when over the course of that week you're spending that time.
And your staff. I think one of the premiums in business that exists now that didn't 10 years ago is that people are looking for flexible gigs, right?
Right.
They got a side hustle, they got a job, a second job. Oftentimes you have parents who are, trying to manage a lot. This is a business that will accommodate pretty much anyone if you put the time in. Yeah.
No, well said. Well said. So a few other things that people like about the business, and then I'm going to rip through some of these questions here. Look, no one's interested in the love of doing clothes. It's a profitable business, and it's a cash in advance business, right? Maybe you've been in a business where you're trying to juggle inventory or chasing receivables. This is a very straightforward cash on the barrel. They pay for the laundry. And again, that's part of that simplicity, which again is not always easy to execute. As Brian's an example, it's conducive to multi-store operation. As you start to set up systems for management and things that work for you, it's not twice as much effort to do a second store or 3 times as much effort to do a third store. So we're seeing that. At the same time, this is a highly fragmented business.
Absolutely.
So there are really no national chains. There are a few fledgling franchises that have entered the market. But I would say a more common model would be like Brian, where you've got 5 stores in a fairly concentrated setting, a couple miles in between stores, and you're serving a particular market. So people, when I talk to new audiences like this, almost all of you, very few of you come to me now and say, I want 1 store. You say, well, I'd love to have 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to take time to grow through that. And again, if you've got experience in small business, that's definitely a leg up. But if this is your first time endeavor, it's something that you can do as well. So
let me offer a thought, and that is, people are probably saying, should I do this? Do I have the skills to do this? I will say to you that I did not come through laundry pedigree. I didn't have a family that was in laundry. I came from pharmaceuticals, had nothing to do with laundry. But I do think that if you're interested in a business that is largely cash business, I'm saying that for good reasons, because you're accountable for all the taxes that come with it, but largely, which makes it a simple business, right? Reasonably recession proof. You don't need a huge staff to manage it. Your staff doesn't have to have advanced degrees. You don't have inventory management per se. You don't have accounts receivable per se. So as businesses go, unlike say if you wanted to get in the restaurant business, or you wanted a Chick-fil-A or a Jiffy Lube, It's a very much simpler business to manage. So, and you can do it as an individual. You don't need to have, you know, a lot of folks surrounding you to be involved as
Yeah,
well.
you need employees, but you don't need
Yeah.
50 employees
Exactly,
or 100
exactly.
employees, so like other small businesses. So those are sort of the reasons why people love the business. And so I'm going to kind of switch over and look at some of your questions. Thank you. You came through big. So I'm going to kind of rip through some of these, and Brian will speak up if there's something that you know that you'd like to add. So there's a couple of questions here related to funding and getting started from a financial standpoint. I do have a slide on that, but let me go ahead and kind of jump into some of these questions around getting started and how much money do I need. So let me start with funding sources. Do we have members that use conventional banks where they have an existing relationship or have a business relationship already? Sure. Is that the most common? No. Do people find a local bank and access SBA funding? Yes, a little bit more common, maybe probably not the most common. The SBA likes the laundromat business, but again, that's predicated on having a local banker. I call it a SBA guide or SBA Sherpa, someone who's going to walk you through that process. That could be a little bit more arduous, but at the end of the day, there's funding there, and it could even be better rates than you may be able to find elsewhere. When doing store acquisitions, is there occasionally seller financing available? Yes, not super common, but that's a case where the seller is sort of the bank. The seller is carrying paper on your purchase of the business and extending terms for you to, you know, buy the business over time after a hefty down payment. But I would say on par, most of the funding in the business is sort of coming through our own ecosystem, which would be, I would call captive lenders or industry-specific lenders, right? So there are a half a dozen or more laundromat finance companies, some of which are independent that have good relationships with the manufacturers, and others are actually owned and operated by the equipment manufacturers to help facilitate the purchase and sale of their equipment. And unlike a conventional bank who may not know anything about the laundromat business, says, well, you need 2 years experience. Where am I going to get 2 years experience? Right. When you have an industry specific lending resource, they can look at the demographics, they can look at the pro formas, they can look at what you're spending, and they can be that second pair of eyes on what you're doing. And so the bottom line is that that's where most of the funding tends to happen, is through these intra-industry transactions.
Can I offer a thought?
Sure.
When I got into for the first store, we did the route of the SBA. I can't tell you. First of all, the SBA is absolutely a good source if you choose to use that. I had a lease that I was working on, and I had a timeline that was pretty aggressive, and it had taken them about 6 months, and they still hadn't been able to make a decision. And so I decided not to go with SBA, and I went with one of the manufacturers, and it was not a bad move, right? Here's what I will tell you. If you go through a bank or the SBA, the way that they collateralize your loan is very different. They don't understand equipment. If you go through one of the manufacturers or what you call the captive lenders in our industry, they're much more familiar with how to structure a loan so that it uses the equipment as the collateral.
Right.
It's
their equipment, so they're happy to collateralize on that basis, because God forbid, if the project doesn't pan out, they can take their equipment back. And they don't want to. But worst case scenario, they have their equipment that they can remarket the location or do something to make good on that situation.
But that will extend the amount of money you can borrow because of the way they collateralize. The bank doesn't value the equipment the way that the lenders will.
Yep. No, believe me, I've heard from banks saying, what do I do with a store full of equipment? So Darlene, for a 2,500 square foot laundromat, what is a good washer dryer ratio to have? So 2 ways I think I can answer that. One, statistically, that's about a 30 washer, 30 dryer store. But perhaps more importantly, from a ratio standpoint of poundage. So if you take the total capacity of all the washers, well, this is a 20-pound washer, and then there's another 20-pound washer that's 40 pounds, and you count your way through the store. Let's say you come up with a 1,000-pound store of wash capacity. You want to be able to have enough dry capacity for that 1,000 pounds plus 10, 15%. You want to have a little bit more typically in dryer capacity in excess of the wash capacity. Now, there is a wrinkle there too, no pun intended, on the dryers, but Through some of the high extract machines that are now popular on the market with the higher G-force, that ratio is actually coming down a little bit on dryers because you need a little bit less dryer capacity because so much more of the water is being extracted during the wash process. So that's maybe a little bit too far in the weeds, Darlene, but generally speaking, it's call it a 1-to-1 ratio, washers to dryers in terms of capacity. Because again, you got a lot of different capacities out there.
And Darlene, I'll tell you, I really did spend the time to talk to customers at other laundromats before I got into business, and I asked them the question, when you go to a laundromat, what's the most frustrating thing that you encounter? And most people say there's never enough dryers. They get the washers done, but they may split their load because of the colors or what have you, or the fabrics, and then there's not enough dryers. So you want to have more dryer poundage capacity than you have washer poundage capacity. I usually do somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4, depending on the store and the location. So yeah,
good. No, it's a great perspective. There's an anonymous question here. What kind of insurance do you need? Workman's comp, liability, property? Yes. Yeah. I mean, those are the basics that you need. We can say that from a position of authority. We've got 36 years of experience writing laundromat insurance through the association. It's one of our business solutions. So yeah, and I think, insurance is really important. We are not a preferred class when it comes to underwriting. So be prepared for it being a little tougher than you might think to access insurance. That's why we're in the business ourselves. But if you have employees, obviously you need workers' comp. Liability is the GL. That's a slip and fall. Something happens in your store. Property, we're spending many hundreds of thousands of dollars or more to buy the equipment. So we need to have that insured. And certainly anything else that's within the contents of the store. If you own the building, then of course you also need to insure the building. Some might add an umbrella to that list, anonymous. You want to make sure that you
there we go.
Okay, folks. Yeah, that's what you call a glitch.
Technical difficulty.
Just like a washing machine. Sometimes they'll cause you a problem. So just be patient and we'll get this PowerPoint back up and just the way we planned it. So thank you. And sorry about that interruption. And let me get my chat back open and the Q&A back open. See, we can figure this out. Thank you. Thank you. So let me get back to yeah, I think I may have lost your prior questions, but I remember some of them. So the next question up was, and feel free if you don't mind to reiterate some of your questions. So the one question was, how much money do I need? That's the one I was about to get to when we got cut off. So I was about to say it's a 3-hour topic. But here's how I would break it down. Existing stores, that's a little bit more evident, right? That is, you see a store listed for 100,000, 200, 300,000, and it's probably a rundown dog of a store. You see stores listed for $2, $3, $4 million, right? So that's just more of a function of what kind of sales the business is doing. And I'll talk about valuations here in a few minutes. When it comes to the most typical situation, which would be no real estate, but you're trying to build a laundromat in a vanilla box or an existing retail space.
Okay.
So no real estate, but I'm going to count the build out, the leasehold improvements, utilities, the equipment itself, and the installation. Okay, just building a laundromat in that box. I think you have to start the conversation at $300 to $400 per square foot. And I see projects go, certainly higher than that, depending on, the funding scenarios that we talked about earlier. I think you should be prepared to have 30%, perhaps a little bit more, but at least 30% in cash. And obviously the qualification to borrow the balance. And some of that may come through this collateralizing of the equipment or other assets that you can bring to the table. But yeah, when people ask me how much cash do I need, I usually say, you probably need 300,000 and the ability to borrow the balance to fund $1 million plus location. So I'll get into more of that. I have some slides on that I can get into here as we go along, but that's the best I can answer. So
Let me give a pro tip real quick.
Yeah,
So,
please.
first of all, I came from a different industry, and so the first thing that I did, absolutely honest, and I went to CLA website and I became a member. The
Mhm.
reason is because what you don't realize, the CLA produces documents that help guide you through this process. There's a lease document, there's a site selection, there's a little bit of everything that you're going to need already mapped out for you by experts who have been vetted and really have been through this themselves. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the CLA website and checking out those resources that are there.
Yeah.
And as far as the costs are concerned, it really depends on the size. Like everything is going to come down location, location, location. You can have a small store in a great location and make crazy bank, or you can have a huge store in a horrible location and that would not be good. So you really want to make sure you start with the size, and the size of the store is going to dictate the cost, right?
Yeah,
So
it's got to be right size for
Exactly.
the market demand.
But that key is 30%. That's what's kind of conventional right now.
Yeah,
Looking
I
for
think
30% down
that's
payment.
really good to go on. So I know Collins, you had a question about what percentage down, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Eric, you're asking about storage space behind the scenes. I think most stores would tell you they're short of space behind dryers. That came up over dinner last night. You can see how interesting our dinners are. We talked about how much space behind the dryers, because you need someone like me that can fit back there and make repairs. In office space, storage supplies, and again, any commercial laundry equipment distributor who's going to do a layout for you should be able to spec that in for you. But on the wash, dry, fold front, I would say that people do run out of space pretty quickly when it comes to wash, dry, fold, and that's like a good news, bad news, right? You're doing a lot of business, but
Well,
you're
you
also trying
started
to
this
find
at
a
the
place to
top
do it.
with build versus buy,
Yeah.
right? So if you're building, you can build in, a storage area. We always do that in when we build stores, but you're going to get what you get if you buy a store, and the square footage is always a premium.
Okay, fair enough. And Core, you're asking specific differences in approach at entering the laundromat business for commercial laundry versus coin laundry, or commercial laundry out of scope here for hotels and hospitals. Yeah, I would say, we certainly have members that are branching off into what I would call commercial business, which would be a B2B, if you will, laundry, as opposed to B2C with customers coming in the doors. And yes, there are a lot of opportunities to do laundry for local businesses. And I would say that most of our members are doing that to some degree as part of their wash, dry, fold operation. There's a gym that has towels. There's a yoga studio that has mats. There's
Massage parlors, hair
massage
salons.
therapy. There's a coffee shop, and you're doing the rags. But I think what you're referring to, Anchor, would be more linens, uniforms, that kind of thing. And we have members that have graduated to that, but for the purpose of this conversation, we're really talking about, vended laundry. Alex, what's the best way to search for a location? Again, we need about 3 hours, but well, I think there's really two elements to site selection and demographic analysis. One is, like I said, demographic analysis. So getting a report that shows what's the makeup of this maybe half-mile, mile and a half radius, or if it's a more suburban area, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, who's there? Like who's there? Renter versus owner occupied, household incomes, persons per household, things that would, intuitively come to your mind as that's where laundry is, right? That's where laundry is coming from. And the more that are renters, the more likely that they might be laundromat customers. Now, we've got presentations, white papers, lots of detail on doing demographic analysis. And again, the commercial laundry equipment distributor you're working with, should be able to present you with a compelling demographic analysis. The second part of that people often forget is the competitive analysis.
Yes.
There is no latent need for laundry services. There's no warehouse full of dirty laundry waiting for you to open up, right? So everyone's doing their laundry somewhere this weekend. And so when you're thinking about your store, you need to be thinking about, will this location help me capture business? Are there 3 dynamite laundromats nearby, or are there nothing but trashed out, zombie mats as far as the eye can see? So you have to do that raw number analysis to try to understand if there's enough business there. But you have to understand, where is everyone doing laundry now? The apartment buildings, the existing laundromats, and do you have a location and do you have approach that's that can, you know, generate a market share to make your project go? So, you know, another thing we were talking about the other night was, you know, co-tenants. You're looking for other businesses that tend to cater to the same demographics. I think our short list was Dollar Store, Dollar General, AutoZone.
Yeah.
Hispanic grocery.
I like women's retail.
Women's retail is another good one. So, you know, that's a real specialty and a little bit of art and a little bit of science, but those are a couple of things I can get you started with when it comes to location.
But let me say this to you, and that is that every person that comes in this industry is going to go through a distributor somehow at some point. The distributors, unlike any other industry I know, will help you not only design the store, they'll give you an architectural plan or printout of how they think it should be organized, but they'll also help you do that demographic analysis and a prospectus to say, what do we think this store can do in sales, right? Turns per day or income.
Yeah. Well, and that's a little plug too, is that every new member of the association, one of the first things you get is a link to my personal calendar to book some time to talk. And so, so I'm happy to.
I gotta tell you, that's awesome. I'll take that.
That's, you know, we love talking shop, and especially with our new members. And so we're always happy to talk to you about your project. Now, if I don't have the answer, I know a lot of people that do have the answers. Leslie, I know I'm catching up here. We may have already answered this. 2 questions. How much money do you typically have to put down to secure a loan capital lender to start at 25? Yeah. So again, I think that's that 300,000 or so that we talked about, 30% of the total project cost. And what sort of interest rates do captive lenders give?
I think I should know. I think the current rate is low 9s.
Probably low 9s is probably where it is right now, which again may give you a heart attack. But you have to understand, this is a specialty finance area. And so, you know, we do tend to find higher rates. SBA is usually lower.
Yeah.
But it's more about accessing the capital that you need to do the project. But yeah, I would say that prime plus a couple points is prime plus 2 would be a good, you know, notion there.
And they'll give you flexible years too, 7, 8, 9 years. I mean,
yeah. And again, apologies for the internet service. It sounds like we're jumping in and out on you, but we're just going to keep forging ahead here and trying to get as many questions and answers as we can. Rob, you're basically asking about valuation. Okay, well, that's a good one. And it's great because we're gonna have slides that circle back on most of these topics as we go along. So, yeah, in terms of valuation, you know, there's a couple things to take into consideration. Again, we're excluding real estate. We're just going to talk about the value of the business itself. You're typically talking about a multiple of the net earnings, right? So the net operating income times historically 3 to 5 times the annual net. These days,
6.
Six or more. But it's really driven by a couple key factors. You know, how competitive is that store in the marketplace? But more importantly, the duration of the lease, because you can't pick up and move a laundromat. So a big part of the value is how much time is left on the lease. In other words, how much time is left on the lease to protect that cash flow going forward, because when the lease is up, you're out of business. And so that's something to look at very intently when you're considering
that's huge,
you know, the valuation. And the other one is the age and condition of the equipment. And so you see a lot of these stores for sale and the equipment's 15 or 20 or 25 years old. And, you know, a big part of that calculus is, well, what can I afford to pay for this business knowing that I'm going to have to recapitalize it with new equipment? So the multiple of the net in that range is largely dictated by the age and condition of the equipment and the remaining duration on the lease, including all potential exercisable options going forward. Leslie, yeah, we talked about demographics. Jason, yep. Do you ever value existing business differently than 3 to 5 times NOI? If they just replaced all new equipment and the cost exceeds the NOI, you know, again, that's where I would be leaning into the lease, right? If they just redid the store, it's really not your job to pay them back for their equipment. However, You can weigh that against if you had to do that,
Yeah.
building out a new location. But again, I would be looking at the lease first. If there's 7 years left on the lease, forget it.
Yeah.
If there's 10 years and 2 5-year options, you've got 20 years out ahead of you, then you can make the math work a little bit better for you.
I'm going to invite all of you to get that white paper on leases because that's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah.
And if you don't get this right, it could cost you tens of thousands of dollars if it's a mistake. I mean, we had one person who came to us and they only had, what was it, a year left or a year and a
They were
half left?
like, they're practically month to month and there's just nothing,
You
there's
can't
no there
recover the
there.
cost. You just can't recover your investment if you have a short life on the lease.
Yeah.
So start with the lease, do yourself a favor, make sure you get that white paper.
Richard, you're asking, is it smart to learn how to repair your own machines?
Hmm.
Yes.
So you're gonna do it whether you want
You
to
can
or not.
imagine that this guy that came out of Big Pharma had his toolbox ready to rock. Well, look, everybody learns how to make their own repairs. It's not easy. You know, if you're like me and have no mechanical inclination, it's a steeper climb. But most people themselves or someone on their team learns how to make basic repairs, and then they can use a service technician for the rest. But the service technician angle, obviously there's a cost involved with that, but more often than not, it's the downtime and how quickly can they get out to you. And so out of necessity, most people themselves or have someone on their team that's learning to make repairs, and it's a huge advantage if you do have that mechanical inclination.
The key is get the machine back up and spinning as fast as possible because it's not making money if it's not spinning. So if the machine is broken and you can fix it, fix it. If you can't fix it, get a professional. But the longer you leave it unaddressed, the more you're losing, right? And your projections are based on keeping that machine spinning.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to keep rocking through. I've got more slides, but you guys are asking great questions, so we're covering a lot of the same ground. Are there tools, Rob, are there tools out there to help support research on population density? Yes. So there are demographic reports through census.gov. There's plenty of online vendors for demographic reports. We like idealspot.com, like find the ideal spot for your laundry. They do a great job. And again, most of the commercial laundry equipment distributors are going to provide you with that demographic information. So yes, that information is definitely available. Bree, what's a good number for turns per day?
Depends on where you are.
That's a whole nother, I'm hesitant to lean too hard into turns per day because it's kind of a limiting factor. Okay, if we asked 100 laundromat owners off the street, they're going to tell you want to have 4 or 5 turns a day.
4.6 was at one point the national average that we got from the industry report, right? So,
but it's also a matter of, well, how many machines do you have? How many of each capacity? You have small machines are probably doing fewer turns, but there's more of them. And your giant machines may be doing 8 or 10 turns, but there's only 2 of them in the store, right? So turns per day is a little bit of a sticky wicket. But I would, but again, if we just had lined people up and asked them, they would say 4 or 5 is where you want to be.
but that is how you get your projections, right?
That's how you have to do the projections on the front end. Bree's follow-up questions is about water prices. We need to raise prices. There are key to raising prices without making customers upset. Well, no one likes to pay more for anything. But I think that you sort of earn the ability to raise the price to cover your costs if you keep it clean, keep the machines up and running, have friendly service, and just giving them a great experience. And we found, or would you recommend keeping the building under a separate LLC and then lease the building to the laundromat, even if you own both? Ask your accountant. I would say most of our friends probably do something like this, where they, even if they have multiple stores, they probably have multiple LLCs for each one. And if they have real estate, they may even have another set of LLCs to pay themselves rent. But I'm not an accountant, believe me, but that's one you can ask your accountants about.
Great questions. Are you getting good questions?
Yeah. Richard, can the association refer us to a paid consultant? Yes, we've got some paid consultants that are friends of the association. We can point you in the right direction. What percentage of time do me or the staff need to be at the store? Well, I would say that most solid operators there's someone there for all the hours of operation. At least one body there during your open hours, and maybe a few additional people nights, weekends when it's busier. And if you're doing wash, dry, fold service, you very well may need to have additional people that try to cover the additional labor that's required to process laundry. So in terms of your time there, it really depends on how good a staff you can put together and what your availability looks like, but someone should probably be there all the time, right?
I think you need someone who can address customer issues all the time. I believe in fully attended stores. We're 24-hour stores and fully attended. There's always someone there. As far as your time or my time, my job is to do the things that other people can't do. So, and that's collecting money. For example, we never have more than one manager and the owners who can collect money at any store. So, that's a job that anybody can do who's at that level. And it probably takes us 45 minutes to do the collections. We have card stores, not cash, so not coin. So.
Okay. No, that's really good advice. So some of these I'm looking through, I think we've already answered. I'm going to answer the brand question. What brand?
Equipment.
So we're brand agnostic at the association. I'll just be honest with you. We have members that swear by each and every brand that's out there. Brian has a brand that he uses. Had other board members in here, they use another brand, another brand, another brand. And so what I've learned over 32 years of giving this advice is, and this is not always popular with the manufacturers, but I'll say it anyway, is that you really need to interview and spend time with each of those distributors in their market, each one representing a different brand. Try to find the one that best aligns with what your needs are. And it's kind of a marriage.
Yep.
And you need to find where you have the right connection. You find the best distributor by your assessment in the market and by whatever equipment they happen to carry. So it's more of a software people thing than hardware. Washers wash and dryers dry.
I would say the big ones, manufacturers that are out there are all great in this industry. So if you got Mercedes, Lexus, you name all the BMW, you can't go wrong no matter which one you choose.
Right.
What matters though is, do they give you the services that you need? So for example, I knew I wanted to have a lot of stores, and so I wanted to have online management of store processes, and I could do that with the brand that I chose. So you're going to have things that are specific to you. You may like the look of one, you may see that a friend has those, I don't know. But you've got great manufacturers in this industry.
Yeah, well, we're fortunate. And again, I mean, are there bad actors occasionally? Yes. Do you have to watch out for your own money? Absolutely. But you don't want to have the tail wag the dog.
Yeah.
And be dead set on brand A if distributor A doesn't match up.
Yeah. I would choose the distributor over the brand, to be honest, at this point, right?
I've heard that
Yeah.
1,001 times.
Distributor makes all the difference.
No, absolutely. Edward, is there a way to borrow the 30%? I mean, there's really no way around. Yeah, I mean, people do partnerships, will raise money among family, angel investing, but there's no way around needing that, needing that type of support. There's another equipment question. To confirm, you guys said if it's sub 10 years lease, it would not be a good idea to pay for the equipment since the lease is so short. So let's frame it. Let's frame it another way. What's the minimum? When people ask me if I'm buying a store or looking at a lease at a new store, I think that the minimum is really 10 years. Because if you look at getting a 5 or 7 or 8 year note, that lender is going to want to make sure you could at least cover that time and then some.
And then you make your money.
And then and it's those debt service free years where you really your cash flow goes through the roof. So again, if we had our 100 best operators in the room, they would say 10 years plus 2 5-year options or 10 years plus 3 5-year options.
I can tell you mine are 10 years plus 4 or 5-year options. I always take it to 29 years, 11 months.
Wow.
Because there's a tax that kicks in at 30 years,
Okay.
or I'll do 15 years and 3 5-year options.
Okay. So in other words, the more time, the better, because not just, again, you need that time to protect your cash flow going forward. And, you're probably going to want to sell someday.
The key.
And you can't sell if you've got 1 year left.
No time on
Or 3 years left or 5 years left. So you need to be always kind of adding time to the back end of that. That's a big, part of the calculus. So we are just covered up with questions, which is amazing. I'm going to quickly go through it. And again, I know that we've been off and on with this, so I'll make sure that we get a good recording out to everybody. And apologize for that. Just internet in suburban Chicago today is not cooperating. So let's just quickly go through a couple of the other materials. And again, I think we've covered all of this. This is the slide on how much money do I need, potential challenges. The biggest thing that we hear from new investors is, and it's shown up in your questions and comments, is getting that initial nest egg together to buy or build your first store. That is by far the most common obstacle, and there's just not a lot of ways around that other than you need to be able to have your house in order financially and get those basics there. And I gave you that $300 to $400 a square foot earlier. Scarcity is a big issue right now. Industry is hot. There's not a lot of stores for sale, not a lot of good stores for sale, and so it's driving up prices and is also taking time to find those opportunities. And we always mention laundromats are a place of public accommodation, you know, and if I wanted you to take one piece of advice out of today, it's go do laundry. Put a couple loads of laundry in your trunk and drive around. And it sounds crazy, but just stop at every laundromat you can and do as much laundry as you can. And you're going to thank us for it.
Absolutely.
Because you're really going to understand what you like, what you don't like. And honestly, you're going to be able to answer the question, is this for me?
Yeah.
Being part of that environment and dealing with the public, because not everybody, and again, it's not a negative, just not everybody's, you know, necessarily, you know, cut out for that. So let's move on. So this is a little bit more on valuation that I shared earlier. This is the 3 to 5 times net. Due diligence is really important. We've got a great white paper on due diligence because you are trying to buy a cash business. It's not easy. Brian's been through it, and it's just something where it takes a lot of effort. There's no foolproof way. And I'll give you another resource here in a few minutes that you can get some more information on that. But valuation, you know, age and condition of equipment in terms of the lease really drive a lot of that conversation. And again, this is the financing slide. We already covered this, but again, that's kind of the lowdown. Sometimes on an existing situation, you may need more than that 40%, that 30%, just to have more skin in the game. But those are pretty good numbers for you to kind of operate under. You know, I just want to give you a few things here on the expenses.
That's good.
You know, utilities, the strictly averages are 20 to 25% of gross sales. So it's an expense ratio. So for every dollar of revenue, I'm paying out 20 to 25 cents for utilities on average. Now,
Across the industry.
across the industry.
That's
So
old machines as well as new. Gotcha.
right. So if you're looking at an old store with old machines, that's probably 30 or 35%.
There you go.
Conversely, if you're building a new store or the store that was mentioned earlier that's been newly equipped, that may only be
16.
You know, and some can be a bit lower, but say 15%. So that's really the key to this business is utilities are the variable expense, and it makes a big difference if you're consuming it at 30% of gross sales or 15% of gross sales. So there's just kind of no shortcut when it comes to old equipment versus new equipment, the new equipment being significantly more efficient.
That also drives the decision to replace the equipment, because at some point your old equipment is consuming so much in resources that it makes sense to just go in and bite the bullet and get the new equipment and make the savings.
Right. Absolutely. And so rent, you know, as low as possible, but I think people would treat 20 to 25% as the ceiling. It's hard to make it pencil out if you're any more than that. Do that quick math on stores that you're looking to buy, because you may do that quick math and they're at 30% or 35%, you know that there's a problem. You know, payroll for that fully attended store, probably this 15 to 20% range. And there's so many factors that go into calculating ROI. Are you heavy leverage? Are you paying cash? But you know, this 20 to 35% is kind of what I see for the better operating stores, and operating margins are for good operators are routinely north of 30%. Would you agree with that? Okay.
Absolutely.
If not conservative. So let's see.
Good slides.
Oh, thanks. This is a good one for the recording, folks. This is the buying versus building. Inherently more risk as the location's not yet proven. But new sells and attracts people and all the rest of it. Buying the store, hey, it's a known entity.
It's got cash flow.
You could get cash flow, you can touch it, feel it, see it. The flip side is you're probably on the shorter end of a lease. You probably have older equipment and you've got to endure this due diligence process to try to prove the representations of the seller.
Previous,
Yeah, so that could be a little bit better. I've hammered on leases enough, but here's yet another slide on leases. And we're just saying, look, this is the key, is to make sure the lease is treated as the most important thing.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at a lot of stores for sale in your area, ask about the lease first. You'll save yourself a lot of time. Because if the lease ain't right,
Forget it.
the rest of it is a moot point.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good pro tip as well. So, and again, apologies for this internet. If it's okay with you, I may go over a few minutes here and just try to catch up on some additional questions. And like I said, I've got a few other resources. Yes, Jason, Wi-Fi at the laundromats.
Absolutely. Your customers will appreciate it.
Is better than what we've got here today. Gas dryer versus electric, it's almost 1,000%, 100% gas dryers.
I don't know.
There are no electric dryers really being used in the laundromat setting. Lease to own, again, if you can own the building, I think that's everyone's preference. In line with a strip mall or standalone, people would say standalone, but that's all like price is no object.
Yeah.
It's harder to make that happen. Pickup and delivery, but I have no idea what to charge as far as mileage, etc. Company or facility to reach out for guidance on pickup and drop off. We have a lot of vendor members that have technology platforms for wash, dry, fold, particularly the pickup and delivery. So we can certainly help you. There's a good directory at coinlaundry.org of all the different service companies, manufacturers. You can even look up these distributors by your state. So you can find a good list of those at coinlaundry.org. Payment systems. Yes, there's another dozen of those out there that you can go on with different payment systems. I'll answer it this way. Brian has all card stores, no coins at all. We certainly have members that are all coin. Was the plurality now? I think statistically the majority of existing stores are using a hybrid system, right? So they're taking card and coin, and having that debit card, credit card, laundry card, or kind of loyalty card, or some of the other considerations there. So
I will tell you it depends on where you are. If you're in rural America, maybe you want to have coins. If you're in a deeply urban inner city area, you may want to have cards just for processing. You don't want to be taking a lot of cash out of the store. But one advantage of the card systems is that if you want to raise a price by 3 cents, you can do that.
Right.
18 cents, you can do that. Right. But a quarter, if it's a coin store, you can only raise it by 25%. And sometimes that competitive difference really makes it cheap.
Well, it's really to each their own. I was sitting with a member in California a week before last. He's got a dollar coin store. Every store, every VIN price is a dollar.
What?
So, so there's a lot of ways to do it, but the trend is toward giving customers more ways to pay.
Exactly.
I guess the way I would
Apple
do
Pay
that.
is out there, Tap. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. Andrew, thanks for the tip there in the webinar chat for the website, for the Facebook group, and past recordings of this that make the job get the job done. Deward, good to hear from you. It's been a minute. About distributor carrying more than one brand. Usually there's a price difference when someone's carrying more than one brand, and they'll be pretty straight with you in terms of what's their kind of their workhorse, their primary brand, and what their secondary brand may be. And most cases they'll give you a quote on both if that's what you want to see. We answered about lease versus own. Success rate of new businesses. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's artificially high, and here's my reason. Most of these laundromats that we see come past us do succeed.
Yes.
Okay. Now, why do I want to put that asterisk on it, or artificially high? If you have a store and it gets put in and it scuffles, you're on a long lease and you're on a long equipment loan.
Agreed.
So you're sort of tied to that business. And so maybe it hasn't met expectations, but chances are that location is going to continue to be a laundromat
Well, you just buried $200,000 for plumbing. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a laundromat. So what I'm saying, Cassandra, is that, yeah, those stores are gonna remain open, but that's why you have to take the deeper dive and see, is it profitable? What's the lease look like? What does the equipment look like? I will say when stores fail, there's really a couple, two, three reasons that come to mind. Why do they fail? Undercapitalized would be one thing. A lease issue is fatal.
Mhm.
Right? You lose the lease, you're out of business. And I hate to say this, but the most common thing I come across is that the operator failed.
There you go.
It was not what they expected. It was more demanding than they expected. It wasn't for them. They got
Life circumstances.
like,
changed their ability to be there.
illness, divorce, death in the family. But when one way or the other, where the operator ended up neglecting the business. And as you're out there looking at stores, you can probably see lots of examples of stores that have been neglected. So that's why I want to put that out there. Can you rent the equipment, Cassandra? These are basically lease purchases, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is no rent or traditional lease like a car lease. These are leased where you're facilitating the purchase of the equipment. So rule of thumb for square feet on a lease, that's what I mentioned earlier, Steve, about trying to keep that total lease cost at 20% of gross sales, or projected gross sales. So that's how the store can afford the lease at that level. Nathan, what are some general location specific trends that are outside of an operator's control? Changes in water costs, technology trends, competitive threats, apartment construction, where there'll be new washer dryer hookups. I mean, the short answer, Nathan, is yes. Those are all things that could be potential risks to your business. I think most of our members would say a new store coming in nearby.
Somebody dropping a store, 2 blocks away.
That's never happened to you, right?
That's absolutely happened to me.
It's happened to you at all 5 locations,
so
right?
be on your game. You got to have a tight game.
Yeah, but in terms of external threats or regulatory threats and that sort of thing, I think more specifically, wastewater costs is the one that it's tough and there's just not a whole lot we can do about it. That's another reason why people are considering always upgrading to the newest equipment that is most efficient with water consumption, because it does drive your water costs and then subsequently your wastewater costs. So yeah, and kind of that SWOT analysis, if that's what you're getting at, Nathan, you did list a number of things that I think are relevant. And again, at the end of the day, who's doing their laundry where, and do you have a better place for them to do the laundry? Time, comfort, efficiency. Remember, you're asking people to spend 2 hours a week with you. So it better be a nice experience.
It's got to be comfortable, right? They got to want to come to you.
That's absolutely right. So, well, you guys did a phenomenal job, and you put up with some technical challenges, which I apologize for. Here's another resource I've had on screen is I've got about 7 or 8 FAQ videos on these basic questions. So they're 6, 7, 8 minutes each that you can take a look at. For those of you that had wash, dry, fold questions, we actually have an annual wash, dry, fold conference. That's fantastic. Coming up in September. So coinlaundry.org, registration is open for that. If you have any interest in wash, dry, fold as being part of your program, you need to come to this conference because it's wall to wall, great information. And you're going to love it. You're going to rub elbows with lots of other people in the industry.
That's another thing I love about this industry, is that it really is a small bedroom community of folks, and they all share, right? So people really want you to be successful, right? So, and I would say you're at the best time in your development, educational development. Use this time before you have a store to learn everything you can, talk to everybody you can, read everything you can, and you'll have a perspective before you jump in the water, and you'll be more successful because of it. You've actually got statistics. Members of the CLA actually perform better as operators, profitably better.
Yeah. Every
Because of the
year we
access
do a
to information.
benchmarking survey, which is another reason to be a member. We'll get you the most recent benchmarking that talks about all these. That's where all these statistics came from that I've shared here. But yes, we can bifurcate the sample and see that our members outperform non-members and are being educated. But yeah, for new investors, we have, like it's been mentioned here, surveys, consultations, books, videos. There's no, there's a lot of excuses, but there's no excuse terms of getting your undergrad in laundromats,
There you go.
because it's all here and available to you to have that knowledge base. And again, we've got a promo for becoming a new member, save $100 and, save a few hundred, spend a few $100s before you spend a few $100,000.
Exactly.
I think is good advice. There's a Facebook group. I know Andrew put that in the chat. As I said, we've got a promo going, and we'll follow up with all of you to give you other opportunities to connect. Rob, thank you. And thank you for your patience. Noah, thank you. Andrew, thank you. Nathan, thank you. Nora, thank you. It's a long list of thank you, so we appreciate that. Bhavik, thank you very much. And we do this every month. And again, if you're a member, you're going to get a link to my calendar and we can continue the conversation. But we've got a great industry, and look forward to welcoming you on board and doing whatever we can to help you. So thanks, Brian, for being my very special guest.
No worries. Happy to be here.
And we'll see you all next time when we do this again.
All right.